Hi everyone, my name's Michelle O'Neill. I'm just waiting for everybody to get let in. Very excited to have you all with us tonight. I can see we've got a massive crowd joining us virtually. So we'll just give people a minute before we get going. Yeah, this is great seeing all over the country. We're getting people to join us. Okay, I'm going to get going. As I said, my name is Michelle O'Neill. I'm the president of the ACTU. Welcome to this really important event that you've come online to join us for tonight. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of all the lands we're meeting on today all over the country. I'm here in the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay all my respect to their elders, past and present, and it always was and it always will be Aboriginal land. It's so exciting to be here to celebrate this moment in the union movement's campaign to win 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave as a universal right. For more than 10 years, union members have campaigned tirelessly to make sure that workers could have access to this life-saving right. Paid leave that would mean that no one would ever have to make that impossible choice between your job and you or your children's safety. And we did it. Just last month, the federal parliament passed legislation to make 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave a universal right for all working people. This is such a historic win. It's something that you sometimes think about when you're in the midst of campaigns. Are we ever going to get there? Well, this is a great story of perseverance. Securing 10 days paid universal family and domestic violence leave is, as we all know, essential to ensuring that people are experiencing FDV have the capacity to keep themselves and their children safe, and ultimately to assist people to be able to escape violence. Economic security is the primary factor that determines if someone's experiencing family and domestic violence actually remains in or escapes from or returns to a dangerous relationship. It's such an important element of being able to be safe. And on average, it costs $18,000 and takes more than 140 hours to flee a violent relationship. And over a decade ago, the amazing union leaders at the Australian Services Union decided they could do something to provide women with the support that would allow them to keep themselves safe, protect their families, and also protect their jobs. This became the We Won't Wait campaign for paid family and domestic violence leave. And this campaign inspired activists and unions around the country to organise, to join the campaign, to go workplace by workplace to win this new right. And from the outset, we knew that it couldn't be a right just for some and not all. It couldn't be possible to have your safety depend on whether you were in a particular sector or industry or in a particular city or a workplace agreement or whether you're in secure work. It had to be a campaign to win paid family and domestic violence leave as a universal right. And what I mean by that is a right for all. And we knew that that had to be a right that was going to be in workplace laws. It's for that reason that the goal was to win 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave in the national employment standards. And winning that permanent change to the NES to allow for those 10 days leave was always going to be a huge and really, really difficult task. To win the entitlement as a universal entitlement, union activists rolled out a strategy that allowed us to build from the ground up by organising workplace by workplace to win. And we'll hear tonight about the win of the first ever paid family and domestic violence leave in a workplace agreement, but then to spread that, to build networks of union members who came together in rallies, protests and events, lobbied state and federal governments, campaigned for and won a commitment from the Labor Party to legislate if they were elected, and took the fight twice to the Fair Work Commission, winning first 5 days unpaid leave and then 10 days paid leave in awards. But we knew that by building from the ground up and by never ever giving up, that there was going to be the capacity to win this, as I said, as a universal right. And the amazing women activists who were part of this were joined by good men who were able to achieve exactly what we set out to do. Last month, we won. A new right for all, a new right in the national employment standards for full-time workers, for part-time workers, for casual workers, a new right that will literally save lives. I want to today show you for the very first time, it's its world premiere, a new documentary video that celebrates this amazing union campaign. And then after you've seen the video, I want to introduce you to some of the incredible women who have led this campaign and have fought tirelessly to make sure it was a win for all. And you'll hear directly from them about how they fought for and won this massive achievement for working people. But I do want you to see the documentary first. It celebrates the story of thousands and thousands of union members who've been part of this campaign. And we can never capture it all. There's too much. There's too much that happened and too many stories that go untold that happened in small, courageous ways all over the country. But it does show you and give you an insight into the incredible activists and show you the power that we have as a union movement when we actually unite together. It's unstoppable. And this shows that when we campaign together to win changes that make a huge difference in working people, there is nothing that will stop us until we win. Once we've shown the short, it's only a 4-minute film, I'm going to introduce you to the women activists who are part of this, who led the campaign, and you can hear directly from them. So you're about to see the first ever showing. Let's play the video.
Advocates have spent the past 10 years fighting for change.
To give domestic violence victims universal access to paid leave, advocates say the change will undoubtedly save lives.
No employee in Australia will ever again be forced to make a choice between earning a wage and protecting the safety of themselves and their families. I commend the bill to the House.
I've worked with ambulance for 14 years. It doesn't stop. And the next time you come, you hope that you knock on the door in time.
Women whose lives are impacted by violence is at the heart of why we're striving for change.
And we know that the rate of domestic violence in Australia has remained troublingly high.
When women first leave domestic violence situations, it's the time when they're at a higher risk of being murdered.
Every week, a woman is killed by a partner or a family member.
This is getting to be an epidemic.
A woman's right to safety cannot be dependent on who her employer is.
The law has to change.
The government needs to introduce a minimum of 10 days paid family and domestic violence service.
This means that they can actually get the help and support they require to be empowered to reclaim their lives.
They can make sure that their children are safe in school, if they need to look at alternate housing, or if they need to stay home and have locks changed.
It costs almost $20,000 for someone to escape.
To know that she has the support to do that during her work hours, to be paid, that we've got her back.
For women to be able to leave, they need the paid domestic violence leave. It's simple. It saves women's lives.
Winning big and important change like this is never easy. It's always a fight. And what happened in this campaign is that for more than a decade, workers around Australia, unionists said, we've got to win this because it's so important, and went about winning it workplace by workplace.
Midwives won't wait.
Beginning with the very first win of paid family and domestic violence leave in Victoria, won by the ASU activists there. This became the catalyst for the union movement, beginning a nationwide campaign.
We've held rallies, we've laid flowers outside of Parliament House to come together from all different industries to talk about why paid domestic violence leave is so important. Lobbied politicians and spoken to everyone that would listen about the importance for paid domestic violence leave.
When Rosie Batty was named 2015 Australian of the Year, family violence became a powerful national conversation.
I am truly honoured.
In that same year, the We Won't Wait campaign, led by the ASU, saw thousands of people add their support.
We won't wait.
We won't wait. We won't wait because women can't wait.
By the end of 2015, unions had won paid family and domestic violence leave in agreements covering 2 million workers. But it was still not a universal entitlement. The first time we went to the Fair Work Commission, we said 10 days paid leave, and they granted 5 days unpaid leave. But unionists never gave up. When Labor MP Linda Burney introduced a bill into the lower house at the urging of unions and women's organisations in 2020, we felt the ship was turning on this legislation at last.
Just astounds me, Mr Deputy Speaker, that more attention is not paid to this national crisis.
And then in 2022, the newly elected Labor government introduced 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave for all workers as a national employment standard, as their very first piece of new industrial legislation.
I commend the bill to the House.
It felt really powerful to be part of this big movement that's so incredibly well organised.
I want to acknowledge and thank every union and their members who never gave up, who fought for and won this. This is what unions do.
With all the unions working together.
It's about knowing that you can be part of something bigger.
We won't wait.
Wow. I've seen that a couple of times, and every single time it makes me cry. It's awe-inspiring to see all of the incredible work of activists from across so many unions who've led this campaign so powerfully over the last decade. We're lucky enough tonight to have some of the union members who've led the campaign with us. So let me introduce them to you. First, we've got Sam, who's from the ASU and is the first chair of the ASU Women's Services Division, who formed the We Won't Wait campaign back in 2015. We've also got Julie, also from the ASU, and has been involved in the campaign for many years, representing a voice for regional and First Nations communities. Mariam, from the ASU and a proud activist working in women's health in culturally and linguistically diverse communities. And Adele, who's from the ASU in Victoria and is a social and community services worker, who's been involved since the very early beginning of this campaign. And Tess, who's a HSU member, activist and paramedic, who's been also involved throughout this campaign. We want to hear from each of our panelists about this massive win, what's driven them and what they think about what they can tell us about what are the keys to the success. And we want to answer as many of your questions as well if we've got time. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll try and get to some of them once we've heard from our panelists tonight. So put your questions in the chat, and to get us started, I've got some questions for each of the panelists. And Sam, I'm going to start with you. You've been part of this campaign for over 10 years. Can you tell us why you think it was so important to tackle this campaign across so many different fronts, workplaces, media, state and federal governments, the Fair Work Commission?
Oh, thanks, Michelle. And I'm so thrilled to be here today. Well, basically, the reason why we had to tackle the campaign across so many fronts was because there was a need for basic education regarding domestic violence, what it is, how prevalent it is, and what barriers people face when they're experiencing domestic and family violence. There remained a sense within the broader community that it was a private matter as opposed to a workplace issue, and there was some confusion around the leave, why it was needed and why couldn't workers simply access their existing leave provisions instead. Going to workplaces and speaking about the campaign was important. Members could participate in the campaign by learning about it, offering their experiences about the need for this leave provision and endorsing the campaign. And workplace by workplace, union members endorsed the We Won't Wait campaign, sending a strong message to state and federal government that this was an important issue that had the support of the whole union movement. And as you can see from that documentary, we rallied, we marched, laid flowers, gave speeches, and spoke to anyone that would listen. Highlighting the need for paid domestic and family violence leave in the media was crucial, as it was an opportunity to bring the issue of domestic and family violence out into the open. It's often a hidden issue. And by doing so, we were providing education to the broader community on why the leave was needed. And in the early days, the reporting of the campaign was sometimes pretty poor. I recall
I think it was referred to as the new sickie in one article. But over time, as a campaign grew momentum, the reporting of the issue was generally appropriate and supportive of the issue. Lobbying state government was very important. As a result of effective lobbying over time, all public sector workers across the country could access paid domestic and family violence leave, which was fantastic. The lobbying in New South Wales was something that I was involved in, and I recall participating in a roundtable with Prue Goward, who was then the New South Wales Minister for Family and Community Services, as well as being the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And union members across sectors, including police and paramedics like Tess, nurses, DV workers, women's legal solicitors, school counsellors and others, attended the roundtable, and we could provide countless examples of how we were unable to provide adequate services and support due to women not having access to paid leave when they needed it the most. And this particular roundtable that I'm referring to resulted in New South Wales public sector workers obtaining 10 days paid domestic and family violence leave, which is later increased to 20 days, which is fantastic. With the Fair Work Commission case, so the ACCU made an application to the Fair Work Commission back in 2016, I believe, for paid domestic and family violence leave to be included in the National Employment Standards. And union members, including domestic violence workers, as practice experts, provided evidence in support of this application. And at the time, a decision was made by the Fair Work Commission that they recognised the need for workers to have access to leave. However, they recommended the leave be 5 days unpaid. We know this wasn't adequate, but it was a start. And this decision was reviewed again this year. And this time, again, after evidence was provided by union members, the Fair Work Commission recommended 10 days paid domestic and family violence leave should be available to workers. And this recommendation strengthened the campaign. So we've been meeting with federal MPs for a decade across both parties, but the coalition governments remain strongly opposed to 10 days paid domestic and family violence leave. However, federal Labor was very much in support of the leave, and Anthony Albanese in particular was very supportive of our campaign. And thankfully, with a change in government and as a result of fierce campaigning over many years, the federal Labor government introduced paid domestic and family violence leave as its first piece of legislation. And with some minor amendments, it was voted unopposed in the Senate and then passed in the lower house last month, which is why we're all here today in celebration.
Thanks so much, Sam. It's great to hear from you, and I want to acknowledge the mighty role you've played in this campaign. Next, we're going to hear from Adele. And Adele, you're part of the very first wave of getting people on board to win the first ever paid family and domestic violence leave in a workplace agreement. Can you tell us about how you got your co-workers and your community on board with such a big and new idea?
Sure, thanks Michelle. So just before I start, I'm zooming in from Wadawurrung country, and I'd just like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. As everybody knows, our branch won the first ever paid family violence leave clause anywhere back in 2010. But I guess I think what's a little bit perhaps less well known. So the branch had already started to work, with peak bodies and activists and other unions, and was already developing policies and campaigning and raising awareness about family violence long before that first win. And I first got involved when I was a delegate and we were negotiating paid family violence leave into our EBA a little bit after that first win. And at the time I was working at an NGO who provided family violence services. And even though it was a pretty hostile EBA and we were on extended industrial action, they actually never tried to oppose the paid leave. So we went on eventually, after a very long and bloody battle, we won the EBA and the paid leave. And the union credentialed me as a delegate to Geelong Trades Hall Council, and that gave me the opportunity to get more involved at a broader local level. And when I became a delegate to Trades Hall Council, I also joined the Geelong Trades Hall Women's Committee. And the ASU delegate, who really worked so hard and pushed so much for that, to win that very first clause at the Surf Coast Shire, had also been a member of the Women's Committee, and that's actually where she first heard about the clause. So as time went on and I got more active and more involved, and then I was really fortunate to be able to head up to Canberra a couple of times with the We Won't Wait lobbying delegation. And I guess for me, one of the things that I found has worked really well for me in campaigning is finding ways to have really meaningful conversations with workmates and delegates about violence against women, and helping them to understand, firstly, why family violence is a union issue and why we needed all workers to have access to the leave if they needed it. And once people were on board, then it became more about, the collective actions, hitting the streets, running events, and holding forums so that we could reach out to a wider audience. And I guess for me personally, one of the things that I found was really helpful was that once I got brave enough to start having those conversations about family and gendered violence, what became really apparent was that most people actually do care really deeply about women's safety, and we're able to get the community right behind this leave. And ASU members and the wider union movement found ways to bring, by having those conversations and doing the explaining and the advocacy, found ways to bring the whole union movement, the Fair Work Commission, the federal ALP, and a vast majority of the wider community along with us on this incredible journey to win the most important union win of a generation. And sometimes being part of a big union campaign can get a bit nerve-wracking and challenging at times, but I manage that, I guess, by remembering that when you're in a union, you're never on your own. There's always someone who's got your back and who can walk alongside you during some of the more difficult parts of the journey. And just before I finish, I'd really like to acknowledge our branch secretary, Lisa Darmanin, for everything that she did back then and now, and to congratulate every single person who's been involved in this incredible journey. And we've got Julie Kun out there in the audience, and she was an organiser for the ASU when we won that first leave, and she was really quite instrumental in, I guess, providing advice and education, and really, really supporting the campaign. So I think for me, this has just been such a really broad community win. And yeah, I'm just so proud to be a union member. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Adele. Great to hear your reflections on that and that message about what we can do when we look out for each other when times get tough in a campaign. Thanks for all your amazing work on this. Hey, Tess, I'm going to go to you now. And I'd really like you to just tell us what made you to decide to be part of this campaign.
So I had been active as a delegate for ambulance division of HSU for a couple of years, but it had always been on ambulance issues and issues that related to my job. And then I was asked if I could go down to Canberra to take part in the We Won't Wait march and lobbying the federal politicians representing HSU. And I said yes, because I'm not very good at saying no, but I didn't really know what I could say that would add to the conversation. And we got down there and I was speaking to all these women, and they worked so dedicated and they were just absolutely devoted to moving this forward. And then we met with a room of Labor politicians, and they said, oh, is there anyone, who would like to start? And the HSU official who was with me said, oh, yeah, Tess will. I said, oh, really? And I didn't really know what to say. I'd worked for about 8 years at that time in Southwest Sydney as a paramedic, primarily in Liverpool. So it's a very, very diverse cultural area. It's also got a lot of low socioeconomic issues that we get to respond to as paramedics, which meant that I had responded to a lot of domestic violence related cases, whether it was directly or indirectly. And so I just spoke about one of the jobs that I had been to recently and what it's like sitting on a lounge speaking to someone. And when I finished, everyone was kind of a bit quiet. And I thought, oh, have I said the wrong thing? And I hadn't. I'd said the right things, but it wasn't what I said. It was the fact that the ladies' lounge that I had sat on, she has never had a voice. Because a lot of the people that I go to, they're not the people that step out and reach out for help. It may have been called by a neighbour. It may have been, or it's been called in the absolute height of an emergency where they don't actually make a decision. It's the only option they've got is to call 000. And so a lot of these women, especially when there is no paid leave and there are very limited options for them, they don't have the opportunity to be able to speak out, to be able to tell their stories, to be able to talk about why this paid leave is so important to them. And in just talking about one job, I gave one lady a voice to a room of federal politicians. And that was when I realized that there are so many of these women who don't have that voice, and that's going to be my job. That's going to be my role. We talk about how, we are advocates for our workplace. Well, part of my workplace is my patients. And so it's my job to be an advocate for those patients. And it's my job to give them a voice, but to also, we look at talking about treatment pathways and referral options. To have this paid leave gives them an option, and it gives them a say, and it gives them a decision into their next steps as to what they can do. It starts to give the power back to them and the autonomy and the voice. When we do this and a lady can then take that option and make decisions and reach out and reach help, she then is empowered to, maybe in 10, 15 years' time, if we did a second documentary, to say, I reached out because I had this 10 days paid leave. And that came because I was a bit nervous to say no to someone. But in being nervous to say no, I realized just how much power these women's voices had. And I think that's what's kept me going, no matter how nerve-wracking it is. Like I said, I'm a paramedic from Southwest Sydney. I don't talk to federal politicians and, speak to national media. But this is so important that you do, and you do it for those women. And I'm just so excited. It's probably the wrong word, but to know that in the future, when I go to these jobs, because unfortunately I will keep on going to these jobs, but the conversation is, because of what we've fought for, the conversation is going to be different. The conversation is going to have a fork in the road that it never had before. And every fork in the road that we come across is going to be not just one life, it's that woman, it's her children, it's their children, it's her extended family. In changing one life, you change an entire community. And to be a part of that and to realize just how amazing that is has been an absolute privilege.
Wow, thanks, Tess. And having seen you do that, you be that voice and tell your story often in situations where you're not used to doing it, I just want to tell you how incredibly powerful your advocacy has been. And you might have been nervous, but it didn't stop you making that the most powerful and strong voice it could be. Thanks, Tess, for telling us your story about this campaign and why you've been part of it. And Julie, I want to go to you now. Could you tell us what for you was the most important point in the campaign, the point where you thought, we're going to win this?
Yeah, thanks very much, Michelle, and thanks everyone. Really great to be here, and I'm currently off country. I'm on Warramite country, so I'd like to pay my respects to the elders of the Warramite people. Yeah, look, Michelle, there's been lots of times that I think that, and lots of moments that I can think of, and just watching that video there and watching the most amazing Linda Burney, I think it was back in 2020 there, that when I saw that at the time, it really brought hope to my heart that we might, there was change coming. I think all of us on this line and all the activists and unionists who are watching on tonight, we knew we would win. We were never going to give up. The points that I think were important was, just going back and seeing people like, I guess from the big people, like the Business Council of Australia coming on board and sort of talking about how important this is. I think like was said, the state governments, in New South Wales sort of coming on board, it gave me hope that we're going to win this, and win it for all women, victim survivors of domestic violence and family violence. I think for me, going backwards and forwards with my ASU colleagues to Canberra, I mean, they were real highlights. Not because we were there, not because it was the trip itself, but it was every time we went there, we actually gained more and more support. And I think those trips were real highlights for me. I guess the other thing was the 21st of May, and I think the election. That's my son's birthday as well. So I just knew that this was a turning point after decades of work by wonderful activists and unionists. They're the big moments. But then I sort of also looked at the fact that I'm from a small regional town. I think some of the moments for me also was doing the hard yards and hard yarning, going out there, talking to workplace colleagues, talking to small business and talking to my own mob, my own community. And, people getting it, and people getting it in small country towns. And I think like Tess said, people who never had that voice. And I think we all know, my community, we know that domestic violence has no barriers. But we also know that those who are really impoverished and those who don't have a voice are really overlooked. So I think albeit the election of an Albanese government, the election of the Labor Party in terms of bringing this to bear, bringing this to legislation, obviously a high point for me. But I also think one of the highlights for me was people in small regional towns and people, small employers, workplaces that I visited, and just women, my First Nations community women. Just the other day, we work in family and domestic violence in the town that I'm from, in Grafton. Having people coming in and thanking the union, for bringing this to bear. I think there are some of the really important moments that I'll always remember, and all the wonderful, amazing people that stood by us all this time and believed that we would win, that we were never going to give up.
Thanks, Julie. I love your description about all the hard yarning that had to be done, and thinking about that work you and so many others did in regional communities, in First Nations communities, in talking to small business, as you said, like those. It's that work that builds the campaign and that builds the win. And thanks for all your amazing, hard, determined, fierce efforts there, sister, and love your t-shirt too. Okay, the last person on our panel we want to hear from tonight is Mariam. And thanks, Mariam, for joining us. When did it feel like for you that we had finally won? And what do you think having this right will actually do for workers? Well, we haven't got your sound there, Mariam. Just hold on a minute. We'll see if we can sort that out. Try again. No, okay. We'll just get our tech people onto this.
No. Am I muted now?
We've got you. We've got you. Okay, from the top.
From the top. Firstly, hi all comrades out there. I feel so privileged being here amongst everybody, and being this campaign has been really close to my heart. What it means, I've worked in women's services most of my life. I'm a member, feminist member, and I know we're all feminists here, but I think note of that. And when you work, I've worked most of my life in women's 20-something years, women's services. Whether you do women's health centre, whether you do, when you work with women, domestic violence is there. It's really that. You in women's health, we're not violence, but I can assure you, if you talk to any women's health centre, presentation, particularly in Southwest Sydney, domestic violence. So what's the domestic violence paid leave mean to us? Talk about a couple of things. Violence impact women's lives. It creates, because of inequality, it creates equality. And with that, if we look at all the work that we've done as a feminist, we really aim to have economic security for women. So when we work for us, if a woman leaves the domestic violence situation with her kids, one of the main aspects that she's worried about, so this domestic violence paid leave will secure her employment. So that is so important, because she doesn't have to worry about losing her home, need to worry about shopping for the kids, doing stuff for her family. So that's one. When you work grassroots, like I did in the past, when you do domestic violence, they used to call us, now it's called communities. And when you work grassroots, when you escaping domestic violence,
Mariam, I'm sorry to interrupt, Dale. Can you just get a little bit closer to the mic? You're just cutting out a little bit, so I really want to make sure everyone can hear you.
Can you hear me? But that's okay. I just need to. Is that better?
It is. Great, thanks.
Okay. And when you work in the domestic violence, when you work in women's service and we work in the domestic, what we know, that women in the first 2 to 4 weeks when they leave, this is when their safety and the kids' safety are highly compromised in the first 2 to 4 weeks. So the domestic violence paid leave, it saves women's lives. So I think this is where I sit with it. But in terms of the way I say something else. Unions make law, and we made this law. This is just an achievement that we made law, that women are. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariam. And you're again that sort of sense that you bring to this about the reality of it, but also how we bring about change, like how we bring about change that as unionists is a permanent change. And you think through our history that's how everything was won. That we fight for it, and we fight for it, and we fight for it, and then we win it, and then it's there, and it's there for everyone. And sometimes we've got to defend it from the people who want to attack it and take it away. But once you've got it, it's a lot harder for anyone to ever take it away again, and we're never letting this one go. So I want to now just be able to firstly say to that amazing panel, and I can see everyone's going to be sending claps virtually to you all, that thank you. It was just great to hear from you. I don't think we've got real question. I just had having a look about whether we've got questions coming through. I think we're okay. I know there was a lot of people, just so you know, people on the panel as you were talking, lots of people were giving us comments about how amazing you were and recognising the role you played. I want to add to that and say somebody just said great panel. It was an absolutely great panel. And I know I've had the privilege of knowing each of you a little bit and joining with you in some pretty mighty actions, and you are a formidable force of activists, and I know you represent thousands and thousands of others around the country, but you really should be so proud of what you've done and your role, and thanks for sharing a bit of it tonight. And all of you never put yourself forward. You're always reluctant and always the ones to say, oh, I don't know if I can do that. But you're a fantastic unionist and activist, and thanks for everything you've done. So look, I'm going to go now to something that I want to ask of everybody tonight, because it's incredible when we hear what we can do, the power of what we can achieve when we actually unite together. And winning paid family and domestic violence leave is a huge achievement. You've heard about that so powerfully tonight from our panel about how it will save lives. But we also know that to fix inequality and to really make sure that we have safety and respect and equity, and that women have rights at work as well as men, and that we've got fairer society, we've got a lot more work to do. Our job's never done, is it? And we still have workplace laws that lock out working people, particularly women in some sectors, from able to get fair and decent wages. We've got, you think of the work done in sectors where the majority of workers are women, and whether it's in the community sector, whether it's in aged care or in early childhood education and care, this is some of the most important work that can ever be done in our community, but it's also really badly paid and not recognised for how important that work is. And we've seen real wages going backwards. We've seen wages stagnant for a decade and now going backwards in real terms. And on average, women earn $472 less a week than men. That's a pretty shocking figure in Australia in 2022. And we also know that sexual harassment is still prevalent throughout workplaces and other forms of violence too. So we've got to do more to make sure that we get the work done by women workers as well as men properly valued. And that requires us being able to re-evaluate and win cases about care and education and work in those sectors. We also got to make sure that there's real rights for parents or carers to be able to get flexible work. You should be able to make sure that if you have to balance caring for children or other members of the family, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to work, and your work should listen to those needs and be flexible about it. But we know that there's more we have to do that, which is why we're trying to win a massive new change. We never stop, do we? New change in terms of industrial relations laws that are going to the Parliament at the moment. It's changes that are going to update our bargaining laws so that we can unite together to win better pay and conditions across multiple employers and not just single enterprise by single enterprise. So important if we're going to lift wages and conditions. It also deals with that issue about how we value work done in sectors where the majority of workers are women and get that reevaluated and make sure that we lift pay in those sectors. And it gives some real rights to flexible work arrangements, better than the ones we've got now, and puts in place in this new law the respect at work recommendations about having obligations for sexual harassment for the boss to prevent harassment, not just having policies about who you complain to. But these laws are not locked in yet. And the Senate, there's two houses of Parliament, the House of Reps and the Senate, and the vote will come down to the Senate to decide whether they are going to become new laws. And we're hoping that vote's going to happen in the next 3 weeks before Christmas. And we are seeing a massive effort from big business trying to put in huge amounts of power and money trying to prevent these laws getting won and secured. So we've got to do what we did again with winning family and domestic violence leave. We've got to unite and we've got to demand action for women's equality and rights for all workers. And there's something really powerful that you can do right now tonight before we finish up, and you can help make this happen. In the chat, there's a link you can use to send a letter to the Senate calling on them to lock in these essential laws. So the senators, they've got to make this decision. If they know people care about it, if they're getting emails and letters saying this is important, we want you to vote this way, then it's much more likely we're going to win it. We've got lots of things happening in this campaign, but we have got the power right now to send off, with all of you on the line, hundreds of letters to arrive on the desk of the decision makers. So if you can, right now, while we are in this meeting, while we're in this room, send your letter and put done in the chat so we can see the impact that we're making in real time. I really urge you to do it. It's really simple. You don't have to write it all yourself. It's very easily done. If you just go on the link, you'll follow it and you'll see how easy it is. We'd love you to be part of this campaign as well. We've got a few weeks now to really try and get it locked in before Christmas. We're going to try that. We're not going to give up because we learned never give up from the paid family and domestic violence leave. But if we can win it this year, that's our absolute objective, and we're throwing everything at it to try and win that too. So we'll also email you with about more ways that you can be involved in this huge and vital campaign. So while that's happening, I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to wrap up by saying again, thank you to our mighty panelists. A fantastic job, and I loved listening to you tonight, and I know everyone else on the line did as well. I also want to thank the extraordinary team who put together that great documentary. That was the director, Claire Lewis. Great job, Claire, and the team at Good Chat that worked on the documentary, and also the team at the ACTU that were part of that and putting on tonight as well. Thanks so much. I really love that we've got that record, that visual record of this campaign, and we'll be using that documentary all over the place and making sure it gets out and about, and you did a great job capturing the campaign. A huge thank you and congratulations to every single activist all over the country. Many of you are on the line tonight. Thank you for everything you did to win this. Every one of you have got a part of this, and you should be proud. I'm really proud of our movement, proud of this win, proud that we've made a difference in workers' lives. And I want to make sure that we keep fighting together. So a great big thank you to you all. Thanks for joining us tonight. Stay strong, and solidarity to every one of you. And if there's anyone on the line that's not a member of the union yet, we'd love to have you and join us too, because we've got more campaigns to win together. Good night, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Advocates have spent the past 10 years fighting for change.
To give domestic violence victims universal access to paid leave, advocates say the change will undoubtedly save lives.
No employee in Australia will ever again be forced to make a choice between earning a wage and protecting the safety of themselves and their families. I commend the bill to the House.
I've worked with ambulance for 14 years. It doesn't stop. And the next time you come, you hope that you knock on the door in time.
Women whose lives are impacted by violence is at the heart of why we're striving for change.
And we know that the rate of domestic violence in Australia has remained troublingly high.
When women first leave domestic violence situations, it's the time when they are at a higher risk of being murdered.
Every week, a woman is killed by a partner or a family member.
This is getting to be an epidemic.
A woman's right to safety cannot be dependent on who her employer is.
The law has to change.
The government needs to introduce a minimum of 10 days paid family domestic violence service.
This means that they can actually get the help and support they require to be empowered to reclaim their lives.
They can make sure that their children are safe in school, if they need to look at alternate housing, or if they need to stay home and have locks changed.
It costs almost $20,000 for someone to escape.
To know that she has the support to do that during her work hours, to be paid, that we've got her back.
For women to be able to leave, they need the paid domestic violence leave. It's simple. It saves women's lives.
Winning big and important change like this is never easy. It's always a fight. And what happened in this campaign is that for more than a decade, workers around Australia, unionists said, we've got to win this because it's so important, and went about winning it workplace by workplace.
Midwives won't wait.
Beginning with the very first win of paid family and domestic violence leave in Victoria, won by the ASU activists there. This became the catalyst for the union movement, beginning a nationwide campaign.
We've held rallies, we've laid flowers outside of Parliament House to come together from all different industries to talk about why paid domestic violence leave is so important. Lobbied politicians and spoken to everyone that would listen about the importance for paid domestic violence leave.
When Rosie Batty was named 2015 Australian of the Year, family violence became a powerful national conversation.
I am truly honoured.
In that same year, the We Won't Wait campaign, led by the ASU, saw thousands of people add their support.
We won't wait.
We won't wait. We won't wait because women can't wait.
By the end of 2015, unions had won paid family and domestic violence leave in agreements covering 2 million workers. But it was still not a universal entitlement. The first time we went to the Fair Work Commission, we said 10 days paid leave, and they granted 5 days unpaid leave. But unionists never gave up. When Labor MP Linda Burney introduced a bill into the lower house at the urging of unions and women's organisations in 2020, we felt the ship was turning on this legislation at last.
Just astounds me, Mr Deputy Speaker, that more attention is not paid to this national crisis.
And then in 2022, the newly elected Labor government introduced 10 days paid family and domestic violence leave for all workers as a national employment standard, as their very first piece of new industrial legislation.
I commend the bill to the House.
It felt really powerful to be part of this big movement that's so incredibly well organised.
I want to acknowledge and thank every union and their members who never gave up, who fought for and won this. This is what unions do.
With all the unions working together.
It's about knowing that you can be part of something bigger.
We won't wait.